This class on research design is one of many classes under the heading of Features of a Business Research Report. So under this heading, Features of a Business Research Report, we have collected many subheadings, and each one of them we've turned it into a short video. And as you can see, this particular class has only got 14 slides. And in fact, when we get to the end, you'll discover really we've only got 1 or 2 slides. But we've broken it into 14 slides just for didactic purposes, for explanation. Now, as a part of Features of a Business Research Report, we would have the research design. And in this section of the report, we will come across various points. So, to start, we should take care that to ensure that the results are as objective as possible. Objective results are seen as far more reliable. If there's subjectivity, then there's bias, there could be misunderstanding, there could be confusion. So subjectivity may not lead to good decision making. However, having said that, it's often the case that decisions have to be based on subjectivity. The very act of entrepreneurship, for example, is generally speaking based on subjectivity. But in research, as far as possible, we try to emphasize the importance of objective results, results based on facts and figures and analysis and calculations. These are seen as the more important ways to get information. Now the section itself, the research design section, this should contain information on the nature of research design. Well, what is research design and why is it important? So explain to the reader why this section exists in the report. It doesn't have to be an elaborate explanation, but it's important to explain why it's there. The design, development and pre-testing of questionnaires. Mention it. If questionnaires are used, then the wording in the questionnaires needs to be sorted out. It needs to be clear and unambiguous. And perhaps the way to get that is to have pre-testing, to have a pilot questionnaire and pick up on the problems before the full questionnaire is launched. After all, the full questionnaire may be expensive to deliver and it may involve considerable resources and time and so on. So pre-testing is important. So look at the design and the development of questionnaires, if questionnaires are to be used. It may be it's going to be an interview. But again, the questions should be pre-tested to make sure the questions are understandable, they're not biased, and they don't cause an offence or don't shock the interviewee. So pre-testing is important. Then look at the data capture itself. How is data collected? I've mentioned in section 2 it could be questionnaires, but it could be interviews, it could be by participant observation, by making observations. So it could be collected in a variety of ways. How is the data captured? How is it collected? And it should be collected in a way which makes it amenable to analysis. The definition of interview and types of interviewers, these should be looked at as well. I mean, who is going to conduct the interviews? What training is given? What support is given? And what precautions against bias and against loose interpretation of responses, which are perhaps not the intended response? What precautions are there built into the whole exercise to ensure that the interviewers go out and bring back what the interviewees meant in their responses? So that's important. And then what sources of information are there, both primary and secondary? Primary information is when we collect the information ourselves. It's collected for that purpose. Secondary is perhaps collected by the government. It's general information that applies to particular sectors of the economy or to the whole economy itself. So what is the balance between primary and secondary? Sometimes secondary information is very useful because the findings within a small sample, within a small research exercise locally, can be contrasted with the national figures. So what's the balance between the two, and how important is primary and secondary sources? The scales and instruments. If the interview is picking up on attitudinal responses, the attitudes of the people being interviewed, if they're picking up on that, then perhaps a scale will have to be used. How is the scale developed? What are the criticisms of the scale? And there are some quite widely used ones, mostly based on the work of psychologists, experimental psychologists in the past. But statisticians and all sorts of people, economists and all sorts of people, use attitudinal testing to get an insight into certain phenomena. It may be, for example, you'll come across in other classes, it may be that they want to use the Likert scale. Now the Likert scale might be a 5-point scale. Strongly agree, agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree. Well, it's 5 points. But why not having 7 points? Why not strongly, strongly disagree, totally disagree, and so on? Why 5? Why not 7? Why not 9? So the scales and the instruments for the investigation needs to be looked at carefully, and this also is the subject matter of other videos in the series. So the design of sampling, coding and method of data input. Having collected the information, it's necessary to code it so that it can be analysed. Perhaps a statement, say it's attitudinal and somebody says they strongly agree. Strongly agree could equal 3. So the computer would read 3 as strongly agreed. And using specialist software, for example using the statistical package for the social sciences known as SPSS, the computer would read 3 as strongly agree and is able to conduct the analysis. So coding and the analysis of the data is important. But then again, it depends on the size of the sample. If the sample is very small, then perhaps there is not an issue. What are the strengths and weaknesses of the techniques used? Well, what are the criticisms of the approaches? I've been mentioning these as I go down. There could be interviewer bias. There could be the environmental bias. Where was the interview conducted? The wording of the questions need to be looked at. Lots of areas which can generate weaknesses. The strengths, maybe it's the only way to collect this particular information. Perhaps it's cheap to do. It depends. So it depends on what the technique selected is, and to list out the strengths and weaknesses of each technique. And that should be done in the business research report. Copies of material used and technical details could be placed in the appendix. There may be several appendices, in fact, one for each of the different materials that was used. So if it's a specialized piece of material, then that could go into an appendix. Generally speaking, anything that the reader would find difficult to find could go into an appendix. So if it's a specialist report, which would be very difficult for the reader to find, that could go into the appendix. Make it easy for the reader. Always make it easy for the reader. It's not an obstacle course for the reader to undertake. It's meant to be something which is helpful and constructive. So use the appendices to present and clarify any tables or calculations or specialist reports or the questionnaire itself, if it's a questionnaire that's used. So all of this can go into the appendix. Now, in the research design for the business research report, this is some of the information that would be required and should be written up. So that section should include information that we've got on the slide here in front of us now. And that also concludes this short class. So let's leave it at that and say thank you for watching.